as who's who, but I have
I'm not
met
in
them,
the loop.
so.
That's like the only thing I knew. I just dropped it right there. But I know she was a diva.
Congratulations on your baby shower.
Thank you so much. And you are hearing Joy Giovanni, psychic medium, as well as former WWE Diva. Not what we're here to talk about today, but we are discussing what the transformative process can look like for authenticity and how it is that we can grow into our true position in life, what we're made to be. How you doing today, Joy?
Yeah, I'm doing great. How you guys doing?
Living the dream. Gary, how you doing, brother?
Great. That's a very strong Italian last name. I like it.
You get what you get, right?
My wife is half Italian, half Colombian. Her mother's from Spino, Italy, from a farm.
Wow.
So it's legit. I get like the real food when she comes over here. She's like, I'm going to make a ricotta cheesecake, and then dirties everything in the kitchen, drops a bomb, leaves the cake, and then you're just standing there with great food.
Probably
and
the best
disaster.
cake ever, though. Yeah.
Oh, so good.
Yeah, that's definitely worth the cleanup for sure.
100%.
She could do that at my place anytime.
Yeah, she lived those for like 6 months. There was like fried shrimp at like 9 a.m. in the studio. I'm like,
Wow.
why am I smelling fried shrimp? So, Joy, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're at now, and we'll kind of go from there.
Sure. Now my life looks very different than it used to, but I guess, right, such as the evolution of our lives. I am based in San Diego, California, which I love a lot. It's great here. My full-time work is as a medium, doing individual readings, group readings. I have a podcast too, which I'm loving. As you know, it's so fun to get into people's stories because while we're all such unique individuals, there are through threads about resilience and emotions and all that.
100%.
So I'm living my best life. My kids are grown, so my landscape looks very different than yours, probably.
No, you'd be surprised, actually. Meditating for like 5 years.
That's
I haven't
awesome.
missed more than just a day or two here and there. At first, I was super upset that I missed a day, which is super counterintuitive to what meditation is supposed to help you with.
Yeah,
I got
you
anxiety
know.
about my meditation. But I completely understand where you're coming from. Living in an authentic life can be very draining, and carrying around a concrete mask in order to survive financially and get your biosurvivability tickets, you have to play the game, and you were doubling down. I mean, you're not only having to be who you were told to be since you were a child, the societal, conditioning that we get coming up, and implicit biases and parents and things like that. You had to go to the entertainment industry after that and pick up how many extra masks to put over that mask, and then run around and try to conduct yourself accordingly. I can't imagine that piece, but I knew what it's like to walk through the corporate world, military, things like that, and have different roles and realize that while I can do all of them, they're not necessarily me, right? What I'm doing now.
So true. Yeah, it's so true. And especially when you kind of surrender to a direction. I mean, particularly military, you know how this is. You surrender to a direction, and then an unexpected turn happens, as often does for many of us, and things come crashing down. That's essentially what happened to me with WWE. I mean, people from the outside would have thought I was on top of the world on international television every week. I was, it was a long time ago now, but I was the catalyst basically for the main event program. And what a lot of people don't know is initially I was only going for the TV appearances, was the way my contract was, but I had agreed to go on the road full time, and really everything looked amazing from the outside. And then I get this call where my suitcase is by the door and I'm getting ready to leave the next morning. And it's this earth-shattering, oh, by the way, we are doing a big release. It's not business, it's personal. Or it's business, not personal.
You got it right the first time.
It was very personal to me. I mean, I felt like it was very personal.
Like, clearly you don't understand how this works. I promise you, I take it personally because it's my life.
Absolutely. And then that was a big snowball. What people didn't realize is at the time I was on TV, I had 2 small kids, ages 3 and 5. I was supporting part of my family. I was supporting my husband at the time, and all of that came crashing down after I lost my TV contract. My marriage fell apart. I lost my house. It was a mess. So, but I was, like you said, to your point, wearing all of these hats and all of these masks of who I needed to be to support everyone else, who everyone else expected me to be. So it was quite a challenge redirecting myself, I guess. And it was pretty devastating early on.
So you're telling a lot of people's stories just in a different format, right? Where they've gone through trials and tribulations, they've hit their knees, they've lost what they believe is their personality, their mask, and what other people have judged them for. They've curated it. That mask is very important. You're in front of it like an archaeologist with bones, trying to make that thing look right for those people around you. And when you lose a career-based ego, it's like taking a mask that you've been doing that with and slamming it into the floor and never getting to glue it back together again and being naked in front of everybody, right?
That's so true. Yeah, absolutely.
And you got to get real close to yourself. Go ahead, Gary.
It's tough when, you have a career that's your life in a way. If you're working at H&R Block 9 to 5 and you have the weekends off, that's one thing. But, when you're living, you're on the road, you're performing, you're becoming this character. It's who, I'm a wrestler, I'm a, an athlete, I'm a act, like whatever it is, like that's how you're identified as. And you have to kind of always be in it. And for just like a phone call to be like, boom, you're not that anymore. That's got to be rough. I deal with that. A lot of athletes, I work with UFC and, for 20 years, and these guys I'm a fighter. And then the minute they can't be because they're injured or they get cut or whatever, like they don't know what they are anymore. And, I've seen it a lot. And it's a tough one, to go through.
Mine was maybe even like a little bit more, I don't know. I think one of the reasons it hurt so much, it probably sounds like first world problems, right? But to make my body the way that it needed to be for TV, that was like a full-time job in and of itself. Jesus. My true dream was to be doing like traditional film and television, which I was. I was a SAG actor before I took that role with WWE. I was very on the fence about even taking it because I was like, oh, no one's going to ever, back then, 20 years ago, there was no transition from one field to the other in that way. And it was a big, I don't know, it felt like a big concession to me because my team was basically like, I had management and agents and publicists at the time. And they were like, do you want to work or don't you? This is international audience, take the job. And I thought, naively that a 3-year contract is 3 years guaranteed, which is not the case. So I was like double shocked, feeling like, oh, I gave up my true heart's desire and my pursuit to be everything for everyone that I thought I should be. And now I'm kind of getting kicked in the teeth with this, and they don't care what time your kids get picked up from school when you're auditioning. So it's like chutes and ladders and acting, right? It's back to zero and starting over, pounding that pavement.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like you have to explain to them that you have two different worlds. Whenever you're in a position to get advice from inside, you're not necessarily getting anything worthwhile because they have their hands in the same kitty. They're looking for the same money. They're dividing it up. You're a pizza and they represent 1, 2, or 3 slices. So they're going to tell you anything they can to get you to drive to Pizza Hut, right? Because they need their share. So you have to start looking from the outside as well. Observe yourself in situations where if you were that person or giving that person advice, you would say, hey, well, wait a minute. Why are you only getting your advice from people that rely on you financially, right? And they don't tell you this because it's a show. It's exciting.
Right.
It's what everybody dreams of having. When in reality, they don't know that it's just a camera and a whole bunch of cuts, a whole lot of editing, a whole lot of changing things. And that's not a bad thing. That's how you put together a product. But it is a bad thing if you're living one way and being portrayed another. That I could not understand how I could fathom that because I do enough shit to myself to get in trouble. I don't need somebody else concocting a scenario between me and someone else and let them have free license with my big ass mouth.
Yeah, that's part of the challenge, I think, especially in something like that. It's so unique. I guess it's not totally dissimilar to something like UFC or fighters where it is your face and your name that's being portrayed as a persona, which may or may not totally represent who you are as a person.
Right. And you have to kind of stay in character too. They don't want you obviously breaking character, especially when you're in the public. So if your storyline has you looking a certain type of way, that's not your personality or, your moral compass as a whole, but you still have to like be that person. And most people aren't smart enough to know that you're acting, like.
Why did I just consider the fact that you would have to wear like an eye patch through Winn-Dixie alone? Like just because you have to continue playing the bit, you're in Publix and your character has an eye patch. But they used to do that back in the 80s and 90s.
Totally.
Those guys would show up at 7-Eleven and scream about something like they're actually still in the ring or whatever. That's the wrestling I grew up on. And that's why I love talking to Ellie about Jim Neidhart, because they were in Florida and they would show up at like all these like convenience stores or anywhere and just be themselves. It's super cool to watch. But to your point, Gary, which is real, which isn't? I would argue that the best wrestlers in history believed they were wrestlers.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
If that makes sense. I'm not saying wrestling's not, but they believed they were the person that was standing in the ring. Right? And those are Hulk Hogan, The Rock, and, Steve Austin. Those dudes knew who they were. And they were just portraying it on a grander scale. But the other ones...
and it is, to your point, sorry to interrupt you, it is kind of a fascinating, it's a different pocket, right? Because it's not fully scripted, even though elements of it are scripted. What's tough is what I observe from inside that I don't think a lot of people realize is a lot of those characters, a large percentage of them are created based on that person's actual personality. So some of the bad guys, you're like, oh, this guy's really
we're kind of finding that out later.
Now things are coming to life. But it's, and they really had, by the time I got there, it was a little looser, but I mean, there were times even as I was entering where if I was supposed to be in opposition with someone, we couldn't be seen at the gym together. I mean, which is kind of like, all right, guys, but it's a facade they're trying to create, right?
It's pretty funny.
Yeah,
it's funny,
that's
right?
Awesome.
Like we play this. But here's what's funny though. We're putting all that work into a facade that we put in front of people that we want them to believe and then expect them to live their life in a different manner than what they're seeing on the TV. Right? You're scripting what they're going to end up doing, talking about, and emulating, right?
Yeah.
That's how it's, we live what we see. We emulate what we want to be or what we envy. And if we envy you, then we're going to put on the same clothes. We're going to walk around. We're going to have the same types of arrogance if they want you to have that as a diva or whatever it is. They're going to play off of that. And that's what ends up happening on the other side of the camera. It's still ripples. It's still an influencer. Still somebody that is making an impact, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, right?
Yeah.
But you found yourself at a pivotal moment on your knees. I like to say that we plant a tree at the moments when we're in our worst positions, which is on our knees, right?
Oh, I love that.
And
that's a great way to say that.
You planted your seed, but it's not the traditional seed that people would, come in contact with. There's a lot of people that look at what you do as like a pseudoscience. It's not real or whatever it might be. I think it's fear to a certain degree. We don't want to embrace things that we don't understand, right?
Totally.
So tell us what it's like to be there at your worst point in time and discover or hone in on what you already knew and move forward into what you're doing now.
I wish I could say that it was a very linear, quick journey. It was not, as I'm sure most of your listeners experience turning their own tragedies and traumas around. For me, before I entered acting, I swear Siri never wants to talk to me when I'm not. She only wants to talk to me when I'm talking to other people. So I, before all of that, had started a trajectory of learning holistic medicine. My kids were tiny. I wanted to know little natural cures for things that we don't take them to the doctor for, tummy upsets, things like that. So I had already become a licensed massage therapist. I was already a licensed trainer working with athletes. So it was a diversion from that I just kind of shifted over into acting and all of that. So I returned to my roots and restarted my career as a massage therapist and in wellness. And it was really through all of the tough stuff I had been in with these, to be quite honest, abusive relationships. I did a lot of soul searching. I did all of the self-help, all of the healing modalities, and really was on
the only one
this.
That can.
Yeah, exactly. Really on this deep searching for myself, adamant that like, I'm not going to live as a victim. Yes, things happen to me, but I don't choose to stay in that vibration, if you will. I wanted to shift
It's not
that.
my radio
I did traditional
station. I don't like
therapy.
country.
Yeah, exactly. And how do I, yeah, please.
I'm joking. I'm naming one. I believe that.
Oh, and how do I turn my own ship around, right? Like partially out of just desperation at that point as a single mom. So it was through all of this personal development and understanding some tools did work for me and others didn't. And it seemed like, some of the more mainstream ones kind of didn't work for me. It was really Reiki, which is a Japanese form of energy healing that kicked me over to the next level. It was something I had wanted to learn about in massage school. But to your point, I was like, I don't want to open doors I don't understand. I really was intimidated by all of the quote unquote woo-woo stuff for the same reason. I was like, and I just was like, I don't know if this is fake. I don't know if this is for me type of a thing.
That's a good thing. That's a healthy approach. That
Absolutely.
also takes away people's ability to tell you that it's not real because you didn't go in with a preconceived notion. To call things woo, but I do understand that how people look at things. I've done Reiki before. I went in, I started my journey opening books and reading. Like, okay, I want to know who I am. What am I? Where am I from? Why is this? And I'm going to sit down and I'm going to start meditating, looking within as much as possible. And only to find out that I'm not me. Right. And I think that I like to look at those paths that we take. Like you said, to your point, it's not a straight line. Right. I like to look back at my map that I've traveled and I recognize something called waypoints. Right. You can put a pin on a map as you go. We don't recognize them as we're passing that toll gate. We have to look backwards and recognize it. But the good thing about meditation, mindfulness, and what we're discussing is you can catch glimpses of those waypoints in advance if you're prepared to have an open mind about where you are, right?
Yeah.
So I want to start out, before we go into the psychic medium piece of this and how we're discussing things with other planes and people and realities or however anybody wants to take this in, right? I was thinking the other day about the Etch-a-Sketch, right? And the Etch-a-Sketch has two knobs, right? One, when moved, will always be linear, right? And we will look at things in that manner. And you may have a linear mind. You were taught to be linear from day one. You have only been showed one knob. You don't know any other knob. Does not mean the other one's not on the right. Just means that's all you focused on. You get glimpses of this when things change when you're not expecting it. You bump your other knob, right? But some people have a different set of knobs that allow them to tune into locations on a plane. It's not linear anymore. When you add that other knob, it now becomes a flat plane and you've infinitely pushed out all the directions that you can go. your radio picks up different stations than the regular linear radio, yet they all exist at the same time. Like quantum mechanics and physics, they're all talking about this. Like quantum entanglement, where, you can have, somebody paying attention or looking at one thing here and it does the exact same thing over there. And people, you can actually relate that to thoughts. When two people on two separate parts of the world come up with the same idea at the same time.
Yeah.
That's
I love that analogy.
Entanglement without the objects. I'm probably butchering this. Beat me the fuck up in comments or send me an email and tell me I'm an idiot. I'm okay with it. I like to learn. But I like to put that out there because I feel like we've not given enough thought to our capabilities. We would rather judge somebody for telling us a different experience than open our mind up to the ability that we may have a lot more opportunity in reality than we believe.
Yeah. And I agree with you completely. And I think for me, my belief now is that everyone has gifts to different degrees. The analogy I usually use is it's kind of like baseball, where everyone can play to some degree, even if it's, on 4th of July in your backyard with your own family. Not everyone is going to be on an A team, what I mean, professionally. But you said it earlier, you touched into it, where culturally in our own family of origin, wherever we're from, we're conditioned in certain ways. But it's so interesting to me how even in our common vernacular, language wise, we say when we're sad, oh, my heart is broken. Well, we don't mean our physical heart. We mean energetically, emotionally. We say, oh, there was such good energy in that meeting today, or, oh, there's funky energy in here. But we dismiss that, not realizing, oh no, we're talking about this additional group of senses outside of our 5 physical. It's this group of 6 senses that we all know and talk about and understand. Oh, that person just gives me bad vibes. You know what I mean? But we dismiss it at that. And most of us, for whatever reason, don't go much further into it.
It doesn't match me. I don't like your perfume. I'll hang out with the people that wear the perfume I like. I don't dislike you. I just can't smell your gardenias anymore. They're not working for me. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And to be honest, even myself, there's so many things that now that I am more open and a little less tense with all of this, that I realized things from when I was like 2, 4 that I just kind of dismissed and put back there in the closet of my mind of like, oh, we're just not going to talk about that invisible lady in that room that nobody else sees, because people just dismiss it, or, oh, that was just a dream, or, oh, you're not seeing that. What I've noticed is where it happens for most of us is in our youth, and it's out of protection from like a parental figure. Typically, when a kid comes in and says, oh, mom or dad or grandparent, you're sad. And they say, oh, no, everything's fine. Everything's great. You don't feel that. And we start to discount our own emotions, what we sense, what we feel.
Invalidating the reality of somebody is a shitty thing to do.
Yeah. And it starts, and I'm a parent. Like I said, my kids are grown. So there have been many times looking back that I'm like, oh, I should have just
Superman,
said.
Iron Man, Spider-Man. I don't give a shit what you're swinging off of. Just be it. Be it for the day, be it for a month, be it for a week. Doesn't matter. You'll move on.
Yeah, but it's even that invalidating when they come in, when there is a problem and they say like, oh, are you sad? Is something wrong? And we say, oh, no, everything's fine. Just trying to not worry them or whatever it is, instead of saying, oh, yeah, mommy's sad. It's okay. It's okay to be sad. Do you know what I mean? So it really does.
You're teaching them not to mask
I've noticed
their
it starts then. Yeah, absolutely. And that it's okay to have feelings. I do think as time progresses, collectively, we're doing a better job of this. But
I agree.
From our generation, when we were young, it was,
we have a tinfoil hanger and like old wires, collective consciousness right now. I think that it's being put together little by little. That's the internet, right?
Yeah.
I mean, our ability to communicate at the drop of a dime around the world has picked up exponentially and continues to. As far as I'm concerned, if we were to look at humanity as one entity, we're getting smarter, and we're getting smarter by connecting, not by standing alone.
It's so true. And shared experience, which is why 100%. I love your show so much.
You don't know it's real for you unless somebody else can validate it down the block.
Absolutely.
I have no benchmark. Why am I doing this?
Yeah, we didn't used to communicate with very many people, before the internet. You had like a couple friends, your family, and maybe some kids at school, but you didn't know what people in Sweden thought or Africa or, I have a lot of gay friends and a lot of them grew up in small towns and they were the only one, and it was like they had no one to talk to or turn to back then. And just people that knew they were gay or thought they were would usually ridicule them. And then, it's like they didn't have the internet and, most of them, ended up moving to bigger cities, and as they grew up, they got, into communities and places where there's a lot of more people like them. But I think people are telling you this is wrong or this is bad, or no matter what it is, if it seems a little different, because in that small town, it doesn't exist. But then when you see hey, there's all different types of people and doing all different types of things, I think it really helps connect people. And then you could grow and, start talking about different things and relate to the same types of, issues. So I think that the internet sucks for a lot of reasons, but it's definitely has a lot of benefits too.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It is bridging a lot of divides.
We're kind of taught, to your point, with, if someone is in a small town and we're conditioned to know, okay, I can't talk about that here, fear of judgment, fear of, it's even down to a tribal sense, fear of being kicked off the island. Do you know what I mean? So we learn to kind of mask, like you were saying at the beginning, Jay, where we decide, okay, who is it acceptable for me to present as in this group? And a lot of us code switch, or is the word for it now, I think, but, change our personality based on where we are and who we're with to be accepted.
I would argue that we all do, simply by design. The most mindful person in the world still has to wear the mask in order to talk to people around him.
Yeah, right? For sure.
There's a certain amount of it. I struggle with this with a son on the way, right? And when I say that, it's in that if I have the ability to discern that there is a certain amount of a collective mental illness, if you will, the human condition, right? How do I raise my son to recognize that from the beginning and treat people with empathy, without judgment, and to always know that any kind of pain being dished out by someone else to him is about them, and you should simply feel bad for their position, because whatever they're saying to you is a mirror in some way, shape, or form, right?
Yeah.
Because we don't have the ability to hurt anybody else. We only have the ability to hurt ourselves when it comes to the emotional.
Yeah. And to your point, and then it's this complexity of how do you hold all of those truths and at the same time teaching this little guy, hey, it's also okay to have boundaries in your space. And it's okay for you to decide what's acceptable in your space. You don't have to judge those people, but you can also say, no, thank you. Right.
While you suit up, go to an interview and put on your fancy vocabulary an hour later that your kid doesn't even know you're doing. Right?
I'll tell you, just the fact that you're even thinking about this, considering it, you're way ahead of the curve, and I'm sure it's going to be great.
Right? Well, I just want to make sure that he doesn't fall prey to himself.
Yeah.
If that makes sense, because us Hickses will beat the shit out of ourselves, man. I'm my worst enemy. Every single day, I make the conscious decision to be in pain at the hands of other people in my own mind. That's batshit crazy, right? Or to think I know what someone else thinks of me. They don't give a fuck about me.
I think Brene Brown, the way she says it is the story I'm making up is, because we make up stories, like you said, of what other people think. The good news is this is the part we can work on within ourselves. So that's the good news.
Right? Just don't do it with like a sand table and action figures, right?
Yeah.
And that might get you put away.
And I'll tell you the other thing is, even with my own kids, there's so many times as I've grown and learned. And I mean, I was 20 when my son was born. So, I didn't, I was a kid myself. And I will go back with them now. They're both in their 20s and say like, oh yeah, I could have done better. I'm sorry that you experienced that. So it's taking accountability.
Oh, yeah, dude.
Too is a part of it.
The core wounds are real. I had a buddy that told me that he wasn't even thinking, and he put his son down to watch a movie with him, and he was like 3 years old, It was Indiana Jones, and it was like you looked over and didn't realize his kid was freaking out
scary.
when they're pulling the heart out of the guy's chest. His kid's like
the monkey brains, the whole thing. That's terrifying.
Now
Yeah,
this kid can't see spiders or snakes or something. You know, like what? You don't know what you're instilling by accident.
Well, yeah, and then it's their perception of the situation too. Like you said, from our adult perspective, it might be one thing, but through the eyes of a kid, and even if we don't necessarily agree with the perception, it's their perception. So it's saying like, yeah, sorry that you experienced
I'm glad
that. You're right.
That. It is about each individual's prescription lenses with which they bring things through. I'll always say that. I think that we have our own lenses that are comprised over time, that each experience gives us a different view of society. That's why two people can get into the same situation. One can walk away with PTSD and the other can walk away with absolutely zilch, right? Yeah. Because they had a different understanding going into that situation. You know, they could have had 10 events before that were similar, right? Yeah. Or whatever it is. It's not ours to judge the other person's glasses. It's to actually take what they say at face value. Simple as that. That's
their experience, and it's okay. And I mean, I'm very American and I love this country, but we do have this paradigm that happens of like winning and I need to be right and my answer needs to be paramount, instead of just saying like, we can have two different answers and that's okay. And your experience can be yours. And like you said, even if it's the same situation and mine was different, I don't need to invalidate your experience.
I need you to come to me with all of your damages. I want you standing there tested. You don't drive a car that's never had a crash test. I need the metal to be kicked all to shit and back. You should go through something before you make it to where you are. Otherwise, you're not tested. Yeah. Guess what? When the shit hits the fan, you don't know how to react to this kind of jealousy scenario, this kind of anger scenario, this kind of alcohol scenario, whatever it is. If you haven't walked that street, you're going to get your fucking I's dotted and your T's crossed first time you open your mouth. I just sounded like a WWF. That was my bit. This Sunday, I'm telling you. Gonna dot your I's and cross your T's.
Whether it's with our own kids or other people that we mentor, whether they're the same age as us or not, it's also creating safe spaces that someone could come to you and say like, hey, Jay, hey, Gary, like this is what just happened to me. Like, can I have some perspective from you? And just like, we don't have to judge each other for that either. Like, we don't have to have all the answers.
1 second. My niece just peeked in the door.
She's probably like, why are you yelling?
Yeah. What's happening Sunday?
She's visiting and is not she doesn't understand the whole like, I'm on a mic and in the studio. She's like, Uncle Jay, make a face. Because I'm a cartoon character. Funny. That's what she does. She runs around. She likes to do selfies with me and screenshots if we're talking on like the Facebook Messenger for kids. She's like, make a face. Do a cartoon character.
That's funny.
So
when I was very in acting, my kids were little and I kept it very secret that I even had them, because back then you wouldn't get agents, you wouldn't get roles. So I had even hand signals with them in the car to know how to be quiet when I would take calls and stuff, so no one would hear them. And so
that's not that's great for the psychological wellness, right?
Yeah. Every mom has that. They have like the eye, like this. All they have to do is like the hard look, and you know, like I should shut up now.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's something that's been around since caveman days.
Like, sure.
The mom looked at the kids to shut up because the saber-toothed tiger was outside.
Yeah.
Quiet your mouth down. Your dad's out there hunting. I don't know.
So
maybe
funny.
She wanted to hunt and they were behind him. I hate being sexist without thinking about it.
Well, times are different.
Times are different. Hunt your own saber-toothed tiger. I'm in.
No thanks.
No thanks.
I don't think tiger would even taste very good, probably. So
Yeah.
It doesn't. No.
It's a cat.
It's a cat. Yeah. Like, no. Cats eat you. You don't eat cats. I think that's like a universal thing. And it doesn't matter if it's a house cat or a lion. You die in your house, that cat's going to eat your cheeks. Like within 30 minutes. Your dog is going to cry. Your cat is not going to cry. Your cat's going to be mad that you aren't feeding it.
True.
So funny.
So true. gone through how you got to where you are.
Mhm.
I want to discuss the mechanics of what it is to be a psychic medium.
Yeah.
What exactly do you feel you're connecting with? Because you have your own experience in this. That Etch-a-Sketch plane is yours to play with. Where are you deriving things from? Can you explain that?
I can try my best. For as long as you know me or hear me, I'll complain about the language of things because it doesn't quite
Language is the great
match
divider.
up. Yeah, and it's not exactly correct. But the words we have to use are the words we have to use. So it was through, I had integrated Reiki into my practice, and it was through Reiki that I had already trained to work with guides and things like that. And I was kind of opening my awareness for information for my clients. And then all of a sudden I started to become aware of invisible people standing next to me, which I know sounds crazy. But essentially, we all work a little bit differently, to your point. It's this group of additional senses that we were talking about. It's these subtle senses. There's Wi-Fi all around us.
I was about
we
to say,
can't see it. And we
I
can't
was just
feel
going to
it.
say that. I can't see Wi-Fi. I know it's
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So essentially, my belief and understanding for not only my own experience, but my years of training, because I think it's important to mention that even if we have these gifts, sometimes they're latent and haven't come to the surface yet. And just because we start experiencing things doesn't mean we know what to do with them. So the type of mediumship that I've trained in is called evidential, which essentially means that if I'm going to read for someone, they will validate with yeses and nos as I give them details. So I'll essentially move my awareness. Usually the way I feel it mechanically is just to the side of me. And I'll become aware little by little it's typically through sensing, feeling, almost like if you had your eyes closed and your cat walked into the room and you didn't hear them, but you kind of sense that something's there. I'll start to know typically the gender of the person, the relationship to my recipient, and a few details about them. And I'll give them, and they'll say either they understand it or they don't. And then I'll continue to work. For me, it's largely through the emotion that all of this works. So I will also get mental pictures. Like if I was to tell you a story about my day and you could picture me doing the dishes. And so I'll get quick flashes of mental pictures, but it's the emotion that really kind of decodes those pictures, if you will. Because if I showed you, for example, a glass of wine, it's only through the emotion that you could understand, is this person an alcoholic? Is this a celebration? Do they work at a bar? Do they make this wine?
That's a lens created through societal and parental conditioning and coming up. You can only apply that element of judgment by being, learning it from someone else.
Yeah, which is why with this work, continuing personal development and continuing understanding my own emotions is so important, so I can have access to them to understand, the story that the spirit person, the loved one, and I'm mostly working with moms and dads and brothers and sisters and kids and grandparents and, people that we know on the other side. So it's why I love the evidential part of it, because I didn't tell you this, but when I first started learning Reiki, I did all these scientific experiments in my house. I did control group with plants and gave, equal water and measured it and documented because I wanted to know, is it
real?
Is this measurably real for me? Yeah.
You're a skeptic, which is fantastic. A lot of the conclusions I came to from meditation had to be in retrospect. They couldn't be something that somebody told me, because then in my mind, I was going to go that path simply by suggestion. I need to have things happen to me and look backwards and go, what is that? Oh, it's happened before to other people. This is what it's called. If I know what it's called going in, I don't believe it going out.
Well, because it's, to your point, power of suggestion, right? So that's how I approached most of this for myself was, okay, this is happening. Now let me seek teachers and mentors and to understand. But for me, really, it's a conscious agreement between me and whoever the person is on the other side communicating. They have to equally blend their energy with mine as I do with them. So if they don't want to communicate, I can't make them.
You make yourself available.
Visual, I can, but they have to blend in with my energy, because essentially the mechanics is my soul's energy is blending with their soul's energy. And if you picture that Venn diagram with the two circles, it's that space in the middle where they're sharing details about themselves. It could be memories from their life. It could be bits about their personality. It could be things going on in the sitter's life. And it's always the things that you could never Google in a million years. It's quirks.
Is it getting clearer with time?
I wish. I have more experience, obviously. It's been more than 10 years in this work for me now. So while I have more frame of reference and can understand more and more, at the same time, it's not like a light switch or a dial that you can turn up the volume on. It's about relationship building with the other side and giving them. That's why I sit in meditation. That's their time to learn how to work with me, because essentially they can't put a new memory or experience into my mind. They have to use my entire frame of reference as a human. So even if I don't remember seeing something, I mean, how many faces do we see in a given year? Millions, probably. For example, there's usually 3 or 4 houses from my childhood that they will give me mental pictures of to help me understand how to describe their house. For example, that old wood paneling, if they had that, if they have photos down the hall, if they have. So it's really interesting. The types of, I don't know if it's making sense.
No, it's making perfect sense.
Okay, good.
No. I'm fascinated. If my face looks like I don't believe you, I promise you.
No, it's okay.
I love
I'm not judging your face,
because
Jay.
I do.
The beard. It's a very judgmental beard.
Yeah, it's the beard.
It's your Sunday
It
beard.
is my Sunday beard.
But I mean, and it's why to say, oh, your loved one is telling me is not exactly correct, because they don't have a physical body. So they don't have a voice box, but they're communicating through thoughts popping in, through sometimes songs coming in. Sometimes
I'll have. And then you don't.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't know it. And then suddenly it's there.
Yeah. And then I'm working to understand what it is. And most of the time, if I have just like a song playing in my head and I give it to my recipient, I want to understand what it's about. But sometimes I don't quite have all the pieces. I'm thinking of one in particular where this person's partner had.
F the police.
Yeah. Well, hey, everyone has their own personalities. You might be kind of surprised.
Something just complete. Skeet, mother.
Hey, it could be. This one person kept playing that. That artist who sings the Over the Rainbow, but he's Polynesian.
Oh, yeah.
He kept giving me, that song, and I had given it to her, and I knew that it went to their wedding, and then I kept seeing the same wedding venue and hearing the same song, and I told her I just don't understand, because clearly there's more to this than that. And she said, oh yeah, because we also had the celebration of life at that same venue and we played the same song. So that's what he was trying to communicate. So it's things like that you just.
It's really me.
Yeah. And it's what they want to share. And sometimes what we want to hear and what we need to hear are the same, and sometimes they're not. So
I talked about that artist today earlier, which is kind of
Israel,
funny.
isn't it? It's like Israel.
Yeah. BJ Penn used to walk out to the ring with him, and I was talking about walkout songs today with my Hawaiian friend.
You
just shared a BJ Penn picture today with me.
I know, that's why I was talking about
story,
it.
and that story was
weird.
I mean,
call BJ.
Probably 8 years ago.
You need to check it out.
So funny.
Yeah, the song I think was like EALE, I think is like how it was. But his last name's got like 75 letters.
It's an alphabet.
Well, yeah.
But it's Israel, like,
coming on
with Kamosi, something or other. Wait a minute, that's a different band. Or a different dude.
That's not the hot stepper.
I love the hot stepper. Nobody can tell me that's not a great song.
I think I've probably talked about that guy 3 times in my life. So it's like the fact that it happened twice today is kind of
that is really I don't know if I believe in coincidences anymore. I think things are kind of just synchronistic. And sometimes it's just an indication that you're in the flow of the energy, and it's great to pay attention to inspiration, intuition. Yeah, well,
it'll really help. Just read some. What I always pronounce his name wrong. Is it Young or Jung or
Young?
Young, right? So
but
if you
I think he'd probably take whatever.
I don't talk to people about things that I read. So if you don't pronounce it once out loud and you've only read a book, you will hold the improper pronunciation of something for a long time until you have that conversation. I've found that out several times based on the stuff that we're discussing now. If I've never had a conversation with anybody, I got my head in a book of words like Kundalini. Like, I don't know what the fuck that is, right? And I'm reading it. Of course, I'm going to walk up to somebody and be like, that, pronounce it wrong, say it wrong. Know what I'm talking about, right? Because I've read it. or I've gone through something or that kind of thing. But the word? Not until it comes out of my mouth in a public situation. We all agree it sounds like this. Do I know the difference?
So true. Well, luckily, that's one of the good points about the internet is you could put in just about any word and it'll tell you. It'll help you.
Yeah, absolutely.
It helps me. I'll speak for myself. Helps me pronounce things.
But I like being confidently ignorant. It gets you through a lot of situations.
Yeah, I've paid the price on that one a few times.
You just hedge your bets. They don't understand it.
Yeah.
Funny.
I lost $500 on the sherbet bet once because I was so convinced there was no dairy in sherbet, and there is.
There is.
And there's also no R at the end.
Yeah, but I was so convinced it was like Italian ice. Like there's no dairy in there. And I was like, yeah.
I think those are the kind of things you only really are sure of if you have tummy problems. So
right, I don't know, man.
Believe
Things
the person with tummy problems. We know.
Yeah.
The one that slipped by me the most, it bothered me for a while, was Funyuns. Like, I know what Funyuns are. Ate the crap out of them. Love them. Had no idea it was a fun onion.
Yeah, they're corn based.
A fun onion. That's what the name means. Fun onion. Had no clue.
But made from corn.
That's even weirder.
Yeah, I think there's 0% actual onion.
It's like that powder that's in your mom's top of the
onion
spice.
salt or whatever.
Yeah.
Yep.
Never been used. What happened to Lowry seasoned salt? That was like the go-to for everything, wasn't it, in the 80s?
Probably not supposed to eat that anymore, but I have some in my cabinet right now, sir.
That thing went on everything.
Yeah, Lowry's is.
Oh, now if you taste it, it's like
pretty good.
It's like dumping a packet of
nostalgic
ramen seasoning in your mouth.
It's all MSG, I'm pretty sure.
Gary, I'm curious to what kind of questions you have about psychic mediumship and what we're discussing.
Does it ever go bad? Like negative, like energy? You know, you're
like bad information, negative, like
there's somebody wanting, or like somebody's wanting to connect with somebody or get some information, and it's not what they wanted, or the person on the other side is, doesn't necessarily like the person, or they have some bad blood, or like some sort of feelings.
The body?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, so for me, I have had it where someone, for example, wanted like the passcode to the safety security box, and I can't necessarily get that information. But the way I understand the life review now, I know it's talked about in a lot of religious systems. It's not them watching a movie of their life. It's essentially, and this is very much like the time-space continuum ripple. It's them essentially going back emotionally and standing in the shoes of anyone they ever created any emotion in to feel that emotion.
No, thank you. That sounds horrifying.
Okay, so be
I
a good
have not
person.
always been a good dude.
So it's why even if someone had like a struggle with someone in life or a challenged relationship, or they were like not a great person generally when they were here, they're so different by the time they're communicating. Jay, you said this earlier, we're not our personality. So the soul of us is very, even though we have some of the same qualities, we have the memories, who we are is very different through that lens on the other side. So it wouldn't be, if any information is coming that's challenging, or they're recounting, for example, like an abusive situation, it's always with the intention to heal. And part of that is, that's the way I work too, is my intentions for the highest and greatest good of all involved. But they're not going to necessarily tell all the information that you want to hear. It's going to be based on, like, for example, your healing and their healing and what they need to express. And I don't think that so for me, it drives me crazy that in our common understanding, we think psychic is about predicting the future. It's not at all.
No.
Because I don't believe it's pre-decided for us like that. We're not just, little minions marching. Right. We can see potentials, and then it's using our free will to navigate towards or away from those potentials. So I think they can only see just around the corner from what we know, because as we make choices, obviously other options unfold for us. Do you know what I mean?
So they're not far ahead of us on the evolutionary path for what is reality. They're only able to see slightly ahead of us, but at least they've unhooked that ball and chain that is the avatar that is, human condition. I feel like that gives them a chance to not have the same judgment lenses stepping on the other side, to be able to talk.
Totally. Well, and to your point, we're understanding it from this, in your example, flat plane of reality, assuming that this is the only reality that's happening at all times. The spirit world's a world within our world. It's just an unseen world. So they might understand different things in the energy in other aspects, right? More globally, more the energy that we're headed to as a collective versus are you going to get that job that you haven't applied for yet? Well, that's kind of hard to say. That's based on your free will action, right?
It is.
So it's two different things.
It's decision in the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes I've told people things that did come to pass, but the energy was already set up that way. I'm thinking of, I just talked to someone that I read for about a year ago, and I just had the sense that, okay, well, I think it was his mom that was saying in about 6 months, within the next 6 months, expect that someone in your very close family unit is going to announce a new baby coming into the family. It did happen, but it's because that couple had already been in agreement that they were going to be trying to have this baby.
The recognition of it happening isn't saying that it's, the future.
Exactly. So it still needs their free will contribution to do all the elements necessary to create that life, right?
Mm-hmm. It's almost like watching the painter or the painting. Is it being painted now, or can you see it after the fact and look at the details?
Well, and even one step further than that, so as a painter, I was an artist myself, which you probably don't know. It's what you're envisioning in your mind as the artist, and then it's your interpretation that comes out through you onto the paper. How close is that to what you maybe mentally had envisioned? And do you need to make changes along the way? And how different is that picture going to look as an end product
like a Jackson
from
Pollock painting? It is not a good look.
Was that your initial vision that you had for it, or was it supposed to be, something else? So.
Too funny.
There's a lot.
Ask you about tarot. Yeah. I'm curious about that because as we discussed at the beginning of the show, I was pointing out that quantum mechanics, quantum physics is telling us that we can have almost like a hand in what we're going to see, right? Based on the fact that we're actually intending to see it, having some kind of interaction with it.
Yeah.
What do you know about tarot and how are you using things like that?
So it's a great question too. Essentially, tarot is a divination tool. It's from Italy originally, and it was used with playing cards,
Italians.
like actual. Yeah, I know. We're witchy. Actual playing cards because based on Catholicism was not legal to have systems of divination like this. It was considered
I love weird things like that.
Yeah. So it's if you're basing it on the very traditional Rider-Waite system, which people have, shifted the imagery and all of that. Each image on any of those cards is very symbolic. It's one of the reasons why it can be challenging to read for yourself. To your point, we're going to be more skewed one way or more wanting to see one image over another. Whereas if someone's reading for you that doesn't know you. I'm not going to reveal my
food card and get broccoli. Like, it's always going to be pizza. I want pizza. Broccoli might show up, but if I got an influence in this, it's not broccoli.
Well, because you're attached to the outcome. That's the thing.
It's one of those word things again. Is it tarot or tarot?
It's said both ways. I think most of us say tarot. I think the technical way to pronounce it is tarot, but I say tarot because I like that better.
I was thinking about the car thing, like Airbnb, like where you can just rent somebody's car, and then I'm like, that's tarot.
Yeah, it's a different thing. But essentially, it's really based on reading the energy of that person. So for me, I don't typically use it in my private sessions. I do weekly readings where I'm tuning into the energy and potentials for that week span. And then I'm using the cards as representation of that. But for example, if I was going to read tarot or tarot for you, it would be my soul's energy blending with your soul's energy. So not totally different than mediumship. It's just I'm blending with someone who's not in a body versus blending with someone who is in a body. And then those cards are physical representations of the energy. So usually when I'm shuffling, I'm already receiving information because I'm blending my energy with yours as we're working, if that's the way I'm going to work. But it's a valid system. It's just a different system of divination.
Sounds
There's
dangerous.
lots of ways in.
The thought of me putting myself in the same pot with somebody else's energy, if you will, what happens if that person has a boiling pot and I'm not?
Okay, so I just did a podcast episode about this. Your Aura 101. You're doing it all day, every day.
Oh, I get it.
Know it or not.
I'm in Florida. I'm definitely doing it.
Okay. So I liked how you were talking about quantum physics and all of that. Science is catching up to all of this energy. The Heart Map Institute has this study where they have now mapped the electromagnetic field of the heart that goes out in front of us. Yes. It's I think they're saying it's about 4 feet, but essentially we all have this auric field around us. Most of us in our common language know it as our personal space bubble. Like if someone got too close to you in line at the grocery store, you kind of want to turn because
your energetic stench. Get off me.
Yeah, they're in your bubble. They're in your space. So we are doing that all the time as we move through the world, blending energy with people, kind of unconsciously as we go. You can do things like grounding or meditation to kind of recenter yourself to your own station, if you will. Yeah. Some people are more sensitive to it than others, but it's from my perspective, I don't think there's as much scary as people want to sensationalize it to believe through media.
I wouldn't necessarily say scary.
Yeah.
But people live in extremely heightened states of anxiety, depression, and mental illness with zero indication on the outside to most people. Like they can be living with that mask and the thought that I guess you're probably going to weed that out long before you actually start pouring your cream in their coffee. Like that just doesn't seem like a good idea. I'm sure you would probably guide the conversation to a less dangerous area for yourself or for them, maybe.
I mean, I also believe in therapy. I also think it's a great thing for someone to be involved in to process
one for 5 years. I've had the same
emotions.
Therapist.
Oh, that's awesome.
You should have like a Medal of Honor.
Well, and it's probably why you maybe don't have as much of a challenge kind of quote unquote taking on other people's energy because you know your own emotions. You know what's going on in your own system more or less.
Yeah.
Yeah. But for example, if someone is close to you, your partner, for example, and they're having a bad day, sometimes we can unconsciously match their energy. And then it's why people say, oh, when I hang out with this person, I always feel down or I feel drained. It's because we're unconsciously matching their emotion. It's really the emotion.
100%.
So
you don't drop something in boiling water and not expect it to get hot too. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
You take on other people's energies around you. You can't not.
And then it's just checking in with yourself. Yeah, it's checking in with yourself. Like, am I sad about something? No. Okay, well, then that must belong to someone else. Yeah.
Is it now is a great one for me if I find myself in one of those like runaway trains of thought where it's like I'm about to fly off a cliff and I've been doing it for X amount of times. And I'll go, wait a minute. Is it now?
Yeah.
That's a mental illness. Why am I thinking about something that is not right now and it's causing me an issue? If it's giving me stomach problems in the now and it's not till next week, I'm mentally ill.
Well, yeah, it's something to look at for sure.
It really is. When I say mentally ill, I don't use it in like a derogatory way. When I say mentally ill, I mean, it allows me to recognize the state of reality and the human condition in that it is a mental illness, but it's controlled. It's a matter of running around the outside and making sure it doesn't get fucking too hairy. Right?
Well, it's hidden in the language. Are you at ease or are you at dis-ease?
I don't know why. That's another one. Funyuns got by me and dis-ease.
I never thought of that one time in my life till right now.
Yeah.
It's dis-ease.
And it's so fascinating that, like I said, science is catching up because they are starting to learn that, our mind releases hormones into our body. So if we are constantly in that state of fight or flight, our adrenal glands are going crazy and it is causing physical problems and it can I guess in a very simplified level, it can go back to checking in with your thoughts, checking in with your emotions. What's going on in my body? What am I feeling? But we're kind of conditioned to shove all that down, not talk about our emotions, definitely don't show what's going on. So
I like little reminders like that. I saw a video once that they were explaining that when your mind races, and I have no idea if there's any truth or validity to this. However, there's always a side effect of these types of things when you hear them. And they explained that your mind will race, or when it's racing, your tongue will be against the roof of your mouth and it will be making micro movements almost as if talking within your mind and racing it. Now, I do find myself in those moments where my mind is racing and the tongue is on the roof of my mouth. I don't know if the two are connected, but I do know this. When I recognize that that's happening and I'm taking my tongue off the roof of my mouth, I'm practicing mindfulness.
I'll tell you from an energetic standpoint, like when we're teaching and attuning other people to Reiki, you put your tongue into the roof of your mouth because it creates a closed circuit for your energy.
Shut the front door.
Yeah, it's a thing. So
there's everything.
Is it applicable to the other thing? I think there's lots more to all this.
Well, it's kind of like putting a rubber band around your wrist and snapping it to get yourself out of a train of thought. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to notice if we're tending towards those racing thoughts. Is it about a particular topic? Is there something that's setting it off? And usually I hate to say it this way, but usually it's going back to something old, a fear, an experience.
Gary, you want to tell her about my rope analogy?
Yeah, it's one of the better ones, but it makes sense. It's like, I don't know, you'll explain it better, but knotting up the rope, I don't know exactly how you say it, but to undo all the knots is kind of like
you have the opportunity in life, if you start out as a length of rope, to either go through things and leave your rope untouched, right? Live through whatever it is that you're going through, a death, a trial, a tribulation, happy time, whatever it is. You have a choice in those moments to either A, go through it, or B, tie a knot in your rope, right? That knot does not go away. And you will continue to tie them when you hit these junctures if you don't go through them. What happens to a rope over time that's being tied in a knot over and over again? Becomes useless, becomes a giant ball, has no use for itself or for others, right?
Yeah.
Meditation is the moment that you get to sit down with your rope and tend to it and start to untie those knots little by little until you do find those knots in the beginning that are the root of all the issues or are connected to. And the cool thing about untying a massive knot is the deeper you get into it, the faster it goes, the easier it starts to pull apart.
Yeah.
And you find those spaces and you get so much relief. Right? You start to find out that those are actually spots within your own body, those energetic things that we're talking about, the pain in my heart, my side, the feeling, that malaise or whatever it is, it's attached to something, right? And when you untie that knot or that individual one, you will feel a difference in yourself if you've truly gotten to address that particular knot because your rope is longer. You can now reach further. You can do more things. You have purpose. With every knot you untie, the more unlimited your potential becomes. So
that's a great analogy.
I love the rope. And I always try to give people a chance to describe it in their own way, right?
Yeah.
I wasn't putting Gary on the spot because he brings some really cool understandings to the table. And he likes to tease me about my analogies all the time. So
yeah, it makes sense though. Like you're creating your own problems, a lot of the time, or if especially men, we're kind of like always taught like not to be emotional, not to let people see how we're feeling. So it's like you're not dealing with things; you're just pushing it further and further and further down, and then compounds over time, and then you either burst and everything comes out at once, which is usually probably a bad situation.
The tea kettle.
Yeah,
or it's like something gets you into the mind state to start undoing them one by one, and I think that the coolest part of all of this is the science relation to everything now that science and and spirituality and everything are are kind of starting to mesh,
Yeah.
It's slowly, but it's just as simple as like, we learned energy is never created or destroyed. It's, it's only transferred. And then you start thinking about that as far as people passing on or what God might really be, or
time doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Like all those things.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a lens.
I love that. Yeah, I love that analogy with the rope. And I think it's important to mention that I think where people get, well, I don't love the word stuck, but where we get caught up is we think, oh yeah, I've already untied all those knots. Like I'm good now. I don't have to, but we get twisted up, right? We continue to get knotted up and tangled, and we have the opportunity to continue to do that work, but it's not a one and done.
Mine looks like that world's largest rubber band ball or yarn, it's in like Massapequa or some shit like that when you're driving through. That's my knots. They're just out there in this big field.
You're working on them. That's all you can do, right? Is keep working on them.
It gives me plenty to do in the afterlife. Just unravel my knots. Where's Jay? He's with his ball of yarn again.
He's on yarning.
Do you have anything that you want to discuss or share before we go? Tell everybody where they can find you.
Tips? I would love that. I do have some tips, and actually kind of to your point, Gary, what you were saying about shoving down those emotions, that is what gets us confused when you hear people say like, oh, I don't have intuition. What happens is we shove down those emotions, they get kind of stuck in there, and then we get confused about what is our anxious, busy mind and stuck emotions versus what is that quiet voice of our intuition. So it's often through meditation, but anyone can start getting signs right now from the universe, can start seeing numbers as signs, can get signs, clear and specific signs from their loved ones on the other side. That's what I want to share is I actually have a totally free 3-lesson mini course. You can find it right on the homepage of my website, joyfulmedium.com. It's called Sign Magnet. Each lesson's only like 15 minutes, and it teaches you, because a lot of people say like, is my loved one sending me signs? Like, I don't know. And I say, well, what sign did you ask them for? Oh, I don't know. It's like, well, that's why you're not seeing them. It's not them, it's you. They're available. They're only ever a heartbeat away, because once we're not confined in a physical body, we can be more than one place at a time.
We're one inhalation from joining them.
Yeah. So anyone who's interested in learning about their own intuition, how to start receiving signs, how to start playing with that energy, that's a great place to start. And it's, like I said, it's totally free. You just drop your email in and it starts coming. You get the first lesson right away. And that's at my website, joyfulmedium.com. You can find me on most of the social platforms at Joyful Medium. And I'll shout out my little podcast, Spirit Speakeasy. It's the mediums, mystics, and spiritual luminaries of our time. Thank you.
I absolutely love that. Do you have a secret knock?
I appreciate that. No, but I have a 20s song music that we play.
Love it. Nice. You have to invent your secret knock now.
I will. I'm gonna get back to you with that.
That's how you get into the speakeasy.
Get into the speakeasy. Yeah. And I just love it because there are so many questions. I didn't even used to believe in any of this before it started happening to me. Yeah. And just like you, I like to experience things and then go research. And so I feel like I have a unique opportunity to ask other practitioners, I don't know about all the modalities that exist, but I can ask those questions from kind of like an insider and move the conversation a little bit further, a little deeper.
Well, that's your job.
Of love, as
that's
you guys
all
know.
Of our jobs.
Yeah,
is to evolve.
Absolutely.
We think we're independent from everything else on this rock. We are not. Our evolution, even through science, math, and artificial things that we create, is still natural because we're natural. We're going to grow to different understandings and capabilities because that's just how it works. Nothing stands still. The only thing permanent in life is change. So if our perceptions aren't changing, then there's something wrong. We're in what? We're retrogressing to some kind of prior state, right?
Yeah. And to your point, like if someone wants to believe that there's only one linear plane and that's all that exists, like cool, that's fine. But if you're open to the potential of doing your own exploration, like you pointed out, I'm an open-minded skeptic, like do your own exploration, have your own experiences and see what you think for yourself.
I absolutely love that. I genuinely appreciate you for stepping out and off that authenticity curb. It's just, I say curb, it's not a cliff. It's just that we have to wear a blindfold when we do it, and we don't realize that is the easiest thing possible and requires the least amount of work to navigate through life because you don't have to remember your masks anymore. You don't have to remember
So
your
true.
ego. You don't have to remember what you did, where you left off with people, because you're always a smile and a hug, right? If you're always a smile and a hug, nobody's dreading seeing you, right?
So true.
I genuinely appreciate you. Gary, I appreciate you as well. Thank you for supporting what we've been doing for so long.
It's been an honor and a privilege to talk with you guys today. Thanks for having me.
Likewise. And remember, everybody, be cool and keep learning.
I used to call San Diego Hot Boston because I feel like they are the same city,
Hot
but with
Boston
different
is a
weather.
bad name.
Are
I'm calling
you?
it.
You're not from Boston.
No,